I wonder how Jeff's getting on.
Well, he said he was going to fish the tide race this morning, wasn't he?
Yeah, let's pop down and see how he's getting on.
Yeah, why not? Our mate Jeff is an expert fly caster. He only fishes in the sea, and he's caught some spectacular fish at home and abroad.
It's a bit like fishing in a river, this thing, Jeff, isn't it?
Yes, it is. There's a lot of similarities, Mike, with that. It's the current that's the thing you have to work, in my opinion, here. The important issues, as far as I can see, are having a fly that won't pull right across the surface.
All right. So have you got a sinking line on there, or?
Now it's a floating line. If the water's reasonably shallow, I think you're better with a floating line and a fly that will sink below the surface and not pull across the top.
Right. So how do you get the fly to sink then?
Well, either the amount of weight that's in it or the way in which it's fished. Depending upon the current and the speed of the current will probably determine what sort of bow you need to put in the line upstream.
So I guess it doesn't need to be very deep, really, does it? I mean, what are you talking about?
No,
half a metre under the water?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, in the top 2 feet or so.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. You see, and there he is.
Yeah, well done.
A little pollock, I think.
Mind you, you'd pay good money to catch a trout like this, wouldn't you?
You would do. Well, that's only
Perhaps
tiny.
a bit bigger than
I think so. I think a bit bigger than that one.
You'd be complaining if you were like that, I expect. But it's good fun anyway.
Yeah, it's great fun, certainly.
Fish, aren't
they are, and I think in general, maybe not pollock, but they tend to give a good account of themselves.
Yeah.
In the sea.
So you strip it out fairly fast, or what? I mean,
just vary it really, because the faster you strip it, the faster the fly will rise in the water, and really, I suppose in an ideal world, the fish are waiting for the bait to be swept along, and the bait not able to cope with the current, and so they're struggling against the current, and that's presumably what you have to try and emulate.
Right.
And
so a bit of variation.
A bit of variation, yes,
yeah.
and I think if the current is reasonably quick, you don't need to strip at all. You can just let it flow down, and the line, as the line tightens, it'll raise the fly in the water.
And they'll take it even when it's sort of dragging in the current like that, will
they'll take it.
Because when you're fishing a river, you know, the idea you mend the line all the time and things like that to try and stop the fly dragging, don't you?
Well, you can let it drag, and as it drags, it'll raise in the water, and quite often you'll find that at the end of a run, when the line straightens out, the fish will take at that point, and that's just the point the fly's raising in the water.
Right.
It's much better, I think, to try and cast across a current than to fish directly into it and down it, and that you've not got as much movement of the fly across the current, and if you're just going up and down, it just doesn't seem to be so successful.
Yeah. So I guess on a long line, the fly probably moves slower than it does on a short line, does it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It'll go across a wider arc, therefore you're covering more water, and it's the usual thing of fishing short distances and then moving it out and covering wider arcs all the time. There's a little pollock having a go at this each time it goes across here.
Yeah, so there's plenty of bites anyway.
Yeah. I think as far as the bites go, what you tend to see here is, especially in a current, you just feel a steady pull, and the idea is really just clamp down on the line rather than have to really strike, especially if you're fishing up current.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a mend there, was it?
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Yeah, I'll show you a mend, and then, I mean, the current isn't too bad here, but if we fish directly across that current there, there's a bow coming in the line there, and if we just flick it up current,
so the flow's dragging the line into a bow.
You've got a bow.
Flick it back to straighten it out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we're catching small pollock, but you could just as easly get a bass doing this, or a mackerel, or whatever.
Absolutely. Any of the fish will take like that. We'll try further out there and see if we can, because as you're going further out, the bows become bigger and you might need to mend a bit more frequently there.
What it always seems to me is that fly fishing's ideal when the fish are interested in small sized prey, because you can use a fairly small fly and you can actually get it out. It's the weight of the line that carries the fly out, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, there's the problems with flies. I mean, you can use big flies, and quite often they're very successful, and I think I'd prefer using big flies to small flies in most instances. And I think from what I've seen, people use flies that are, in my opinion, too small. Fish will take big flies, and big flies can be difficult to cast if they're made of synthetic material which dries out very quickly, because then they tend to flutter in the air, and it's more difficult to cast them, whereas the natural materials hold onto the water and give you a little bit of weight to enable the fly to pass through the air.
I'd never thought about that. But I mean, the fly fishing's the ideal way of getting a very lightweight lure out to the fish, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's a perfect way of doing that.
And the advantage of the lightweight lure made of very flimsy filament is that it flutters in the current and has movement of its own.
Yeah. That gear looks a bit better than the crap I use, Jeff.
Yeah, it's reasonable gear. It's specifically made for saltwater fly fishing, but you don't necessarily need to use specialist tackle. In most instances you could use ordinary reservoir fly tackle, it would be fine.
I mean, you do a lot of sea fishing with it, don't you? So
I think
it's worth having good gear.
Yeah, I mean, I only fish in the sea, so the advantage, I think, in having tackle that's made for the conditions are that the rods tend to be much stiffer and heavier than reservoir tackle, and that enables you to cast bigger flies in bad conditions.
So what is that rod then?
This is just an 8-weight rod.
So that's not very heavy, is it?
It's not very heavy, no, but if you compared it to an 8-weight reservoir rod, it would be much stiffer. There's a lot more backbone to it than a reservoir rod.
So what's the advantage of that then, really?
Well, the advantage is mainly in being able to get large flies out into strong winds. And also in the sea you can come across some large fish, and therefore you need to be able to beat them, and you need a bit of backbone in the rod to do that.
So it's an 8-weight line you're using as well, isn't it?
It depends upon the rod, yes, but I tend to use the right weight of line for rod. In heavy conditions it can help to shorten the leader and put a higher weight line on, go up to a 9-weight, but it depends upon the rod. Some rods will take it and some won't. Again, in bad conditions everything should be shorter. You shorten your leaders. At the moment I'm fishing a leader that's about 8 or 9 feet long, and for most instances that's more than enough. And in many instances, especially if you are using a sinking line, that would be too long. and we'd be looking at 4 feet of a leader, that's all.
And the reel's got a drag on it, has it?
The reel, yeah, the reel's got has a drag system on it. With the reels, salt water can do them a lot of damage, so you can get some reels with fully enclosed drag systems that don't get bound up by salt. But yes, it has a drag system. I find always setting it very light is best, and then you can tighten it up if you need to, if you're hooking to a big fish. And that you have to strip the line off the reel to cast, and if it's tight, it's a lot of work trying to take it off all the time. But it's made of anodized metal, anodized aluminium, so it has some protection against the sea. But other than that, it's
well, I think nothing's totally saltwater proof.
No, they all go in time. Well, they've got some graphite reels, but again, I've never tried those. There must be some future in those sort of tackle.
Yeah. And the stripping basket, that's fairly low tech.
The stripping basket is as low tech as you. I'm very proud of low tech stripping baskets. There is no need to spend a lot of money on tackle at all.
No.
And in many instances, it wouldn't make any difference here, really, whether you had specialist saltwater tackle or ordinary trout tackle. No difference at all.
That's a relief to me, 'cause that's all I've got.
It's obviously more important to know where the fish are, and
well, that applies to everything.
It does, and that's the secret.
Right place, right time.
Yeah, I'd say.
And the tackle's a sort of
it only gives advantages in certain situations. Oh grief, me too. I dislocated my toe, and I've done all sorts. We are crackers.